This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, Picard dies!
Hello everyone, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the podcast that can exist free from the limitations of matter. My name is Gep, and I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi!
And I've already forgotten what we're doing, because this is probably the single most forgettable episode of Star Trek that I have ever encountered.
Well, it basically involves plot elements from several other different episodes. So, yeah.
There's two parts to this episode that I remember, and I didn't remember that either of them were part of this episode.
Because they're kind of, I guess, tropes that show up in Star Trek, mainly TNG, but a little bit of original series as well, over and over again. So, you know.
Though I will say, so I was thinking about it, I'm like, this is probably the contender for the world's most forgettable Star Trek episode. But there may be other ones I'm not remembering.
Yes.
And
hey, do you remember the apple?
I mean, I do remember the apple, yeah. Because the apple had a lot of weirdly awkward ways that they were trying to talk about sex in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
And I guess I would say that we'll come back at the end and talk about whether any of these are the most forgettable episode, but we will have forgotten by then.
Maybe we'll have to re-listen to our own show in order to try to remember them at some point, but by the time we're done with that, we'll have forgotten them again.
Yeah, so this episode is Lonely Among Us, which is a particularly odd title, slightly awkward to say.
But I guess it's exactly what it says on the tin.
I'm going to say I'm probably not going to be making a lot of sus jokes because I'm too old for that.
Yeah, I've tried to play Among Us once, but I mostly know it from the memes.
Yeah, that's where I'm familiar with it as well.
Yes. Or as some of my friends refer to as the Amogus, as in like there's some sort of eldritch being that is the combined elements of all those memes together, and it now exists separate from the game.
Oh, I thought that was just going to be the clever name that they came up with for the alien intruder dude. It's the Among Us.
Well, we can call this alien entity being the Amogus.
Yeah, I think we could just go with that, because they never name the thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's just the Amogus from now on. We have decided, put it on Memory Alpha.
It now has a name.
It's all right.
So, this one has some characters in it.
Yeah, it does. Well, first off, this was sort of written by DC Fontana. The story writer doesn't have a lot of information around, but the teleplay was by DC Fontana, so I guess blame one of them for this, basically.
Yes, Mike Halperin. This is I think the only TNG episode he did, and maybe the only Star Trek one, but they are responsible for some other things for like the Fall Guy, Quincy, He-Man, and the Masters of the Universe, apparently. So
some of those.
Yeah. Like he created the He-Man Masters of the Universe at the beginning TV movie in 2002.
So we did have a few guest stars. Sort of, they didn't play. They played like major characters who are so unimportant to anything that's happening.
Yes.
So we'll just start in the order of least surprising. Carrie Raz is playing Lieutenant Singh, who is in a lot of pretty well-known shows, did a lot of guest stars on things like MASH and the A-Team, and movies like Pet Sematary and All I Want for Christmas. So been in a lot of things.
Yeah, and is still going about acting. Some recent things is Hot Mess Holiday, My Country, Go North in 2015.
John Durbin plays Sestar, who I don't think they ever actually say their names in the episode.
I don't think so.
But they are the head delegate of the Sele, who are snake dudes. Because that's why their names are all snakes.
So he's also going to come back for more Star Trek later. He'll be Gul Lamek.
Yeah, he's
in
going to
Chain of
play
Command.
Cardassians in TNG, other aliens in DS9, even though they have a lot of more Cardassians in DS9 than TNG.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a lot of pretty well-known 80s properties, like the A-Team, Max Headroom, which we need to get to at some point.
Yes. Dragul.
And smaller kind of B-movies like Return of the Living Dead.
Do zombies count as sci-fi?
It depends on what motivates your zombies.
All right, well, I'll have to think about that one then.
And then finally...
Yeah, the big name.
Yeah, the big name, who is uncredited for this episode because he didn't know how it would turn out.
And I guess understandably so, given, what they're working with.
So Mark Alamo, who's playing Picard... It's N apostrophe D apostrophe D.
Yes.
Yeah. He's the Antican head delegate.
And he kind of, he's, I guess, more well-known in Star Trek as, of course, Gul Macet, but also known as Gul Dukat, who was in like a bazillion episodes of Deep Space Nine. His Dukat sort of mannerisms do come through a little bit here, but you kind of have to be paying attention to him.
Yeah, you really have to pay attention to see him under this like dog Halloween mask they basically have him in. But he does have the distinction of, in Next Generation, playing the first Romulan and first Cardassian.
Indeed. So, obviously there's some weird cloning going on here, but, Romulans are, that's something they do, apparently.
Well, all Star Trek species are progenited from that one really smooth-looking alien.
Yes, that kind of looks like a founder, but apparently they're somewhere in there. There's someone that looks like Mark Alamo, and, so he just pops up everywhere.
Yeah, I guess they wanted to forget about how bad that one episode was that we'll get to, where they discover that the origin of humanoid life. See, this is what happens. This is my entire criticism of new Star Trek. I am currently watching through season 2 of Picard. It's better than season 1, but my God, you don't need to explain everything. Stop it. We didn't need to know why the French family has an English accent. Go away.
Well, Picard's probably still speaking French, but just with an English accent.
No, didn't you watch the new one? His family got forced out of France, which is why do we need to explain this? Stop it.
Oh, wow.
We don't need to explain things. Just stop trying to explain things. It's a problem. Anyway, there's nothing to talk about in this episode, so I'm avoiding it entirely. This next episode,
so we can complain about other Star Trek in the meantime.
Yes, we will complain about all other Star Trek and talk about how we don't understand Among Us memes because we're in our 30s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the main guest stars. There's a lot of other people who are also in heavy alien makeup, but they sort of are interchangeable. So
yes. Oh, hey, some sort of security guard number 1 shows up here. I wonder what he's gonna end up doing.
Security guard number 1? Yeah, I don't even have him on the cast list that I'm looking at.
Yeah, he also played the one dude on the battle bridge in the pilot.
Oh, is that who he's credited as in this episode?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is, in fact, the second appearance, the second episode of Colm Melaney, who, will later be very famous. He does have such screen charisma. He does, who he winds up being later as a fan of the show. But even, the couple of scenes that he shows up in, he's a very good actor for what they're giving him in this, which is very little.
Yes, it's like, be kind of exasperated with trying to deal with these aliens. It's like, okay, I'll roll with it.
Okay, so the Enterprise has been sent to carry delegates from 2 planets in the same system. So 2 planets, both developed independent sentient life forms. They are both trying to join the Federation, but they also hate each other. So in the interest of peace, they're trying to take them to a neutral planet named Parliament, so that they can deal with this before they have any hope of joining the Federation. Because why would anyone who is actively in hostilities with another planet be like, who I'm going to join is the people who are about non-hostility?
Yep.
This comes up a lot, in fact.
There's a few other episodes in TNG especially where this is, it's like, you guys kind of like are in conflict right now. That kind of makes it hard for us to want to like have you join us, because that means we'll also be in conflict, guys, right? Realize that, right?
So the Sele, large snake aliens, who probably are the people who should have been the aliens in Code of Honor, they're brought on board, and they're immediately unhappy because they can smell that the Andkins were brought on first.
I guess they have very sensitive tongues.
Yeah, like snakes. Also, they're going to be placed in quarters as far away from the Andkins as possible on board this ship, which is the size of a city.
Yep. So you guys can be on like deck 20 something, and you guys can be on like deck 2. How about that?
Like this ship is the size of Manhattan. So I feel like you could let these people avoid each other if you wanted to. Back on the bridge, Picard and Riker have a thing about how they are so super enlightened they can't even understand hostility.
So this is a case of we're going to sort of be better than everyone else we meet because we're just so special.
Yeah. This is something that Star Trek tries to do a lot in original series. They do it in the first and second season of Next Gen a couple times, but thankfully they kind of fall off of it as a writing trope, both because it's superbly stupid from a storytelling standpoint, because there's nothing more unrelatable than your characters coming up and going, I don't even understand this basic thing that's common to most people. And also it makes your characters sound stupid because you are trained diplomats.
Yes. Well, I guess to a certain degree this is maybe them kind of venting, but still.
But it's not venting. It's not, God, I can't even understand how these people hate each other so much. It's like, I find hating someone else a confusing concept because humans haven't done that for hundreds of years. We've never hated anyone.
Sure you haven't.
So they decide that they're going to take a close look at a passing energy cloud on their way to Parliament because, it's right here, and they do science stuff.
Before we get too far, so Parliament is very much a parallel to Babel, which is also a place that an Enterprise was taking a bunch of delegates to in the original series, if you recall. Also involving a story, written by D.C. Fontana.
Yeah, they have these interestingly, very thematically named planets for this kind of thing.
Which is kind of cool, but also, like, how did someone set this up originally?
I would imagine that this was probably a colony. At least I hope this was like a colony. Like, they found an uninhabited planet. Like, this isn't a good strategic location to be like a diplomatic hub. We're going to name it accordingly. And they didn't just show up on some planet and go like, hey, you guys are called Parliament now because it fits with our general sort of peacekeeping themes. Cool?
No, this planet's called Super Earth.
Or Parliament is one of those things where it's a word that sounds like a word in English but actually means, super cool purple planet in whatever language the planet speaks.
Yes. Hey, maybe they could, instead of having a planet you go to, maybe like a space station in neutral territory, a place for diplomats, wanderers, entrepreneurs, and that sort of thing. And there could be like a some sort of project, like to build this sort of Babylon station.
You could make 5 or so of the things.
Yeah,
I mean, it's an idea. I don't know if anyone's really fleshed it out.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to keep watching and figure out if that ever ends up happening.
All right. So they pass by this gas cloud thing. Worf and Geordi are doing maintenance on the sensors, but it shouldn't interfere with them scanning the gas cloud. So they come in close, and a strange blue electrical something or other melds with the ship and winds up going into the sensors and knocks out Worf.
Yes, and Worf gives us one of the most amazing faces as he gets shocked by it at the same time. So it's like, Worf, you're kind of like just hilarious in how you're looking here, even though it's clearly supposed to be a depiction of pain here. So
Worf can mug to the camera like nobody's business.
It's great.
So Dr. Crusher runs down to check him out, but they need to sedate him because he wakes up and starts to just angrily attack everyone around him.
Well, this is kind of Worf's MO, so
yeah. Worf do what Worf does. So, the Antikins have a misunderstanding with Yar because they want live food, which they brought on board with them. But, humans don't use animals for food anymore, so people don't understand what's happening. This is a weird one. This is some weird vegan stuff they put in the middle of the episode for some reason.
It's like, okay, cool, you got the replicators to basically make magic up food wherever you like, of basically any sort of type, that doesn't require actually, having an actual real animal product in the process, but not understanding how you came up with the concept of steak in the first place.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Yeah.
Also, I know there's wars and stuff in between here, but if you're saying we no longer use, the word they use is enslave, which I find like a pretty insulting way to write that.
Yeah.
But even saying we no longer use animals for food purposes, you kind of wind up with a weird thing here. I'm gonna go on a soft aside. There's plenty of people who want to eliminate animal products entirely from our food supply. There are arguments here to be had. There's definitely problems with current factory farming and the levels at which we consume certain meat products, and it does cause issues. But most sustainable farming methods that we've been using for thousands of years rely very heavily on incorporating animals in some capacity or another. And also, we have a lot of these animals that are completely domesticated and cannot exist in the environment that you would have to decide what to do with if you want to stop using animal products entirely.
Yeah, so I guess if we were going to stop using animal products entirely, we would have to eat all of the cows.
Yeah, you would have to basically decide that you're going to eradicate all domestic cows and chickens and pigs and etc. And
which is a little frightening.
It's a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things being done in horrific ways, and you shouldn't be supporting factory farming in the same kind of ways that we are now. I will completely say that. But as a concept, completely removing animals from the food supply has some major problems that are not particularly being dealt with.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that's kind of like, this is something we also need to consider as part of the, any sort of way forward on this. So
yeah, you can't exactly, let 20,000 cows suddenly just wander out free.
Though it would potentially be hilarious.
I mean, it would take care of itself eventually because most domestic animals are incapable of living without some amount of human intervention.
Indeed. But I'm just kind of imagining, it's like, all right, so we're downtown here, and there's a bunch of cows here just kind of hanging out. This is awkward.
Yeah, cows in the middle of the road. So anyway, soft aside over. We can move on. Forgot there was weird vegan animal rights messaging in the middle of this thing, though. So in sickbay, Crusher starts working on Worf, and then she is hit by the blue electric stuff. Worf normalizes immediately.
Doctor, I appear to have been zapped. What's up?
Yeah, Crusher just walks away, wanders off.
Doctor?
And it turns home to Wesley, who's excited to get to talk about warp theory for a while, but she mumbles about helm control and then wanders away.
So I think this might be should be a tip-off because, Crusher being, Beverly being, interested in what Wesley's actually doing is a little suspicious.
Mm-hmm. Which is so sad. The way that they characterize Wesley on this show is so sad. He's just a little nerdy kid who wants to talk about warp fields, and it's like, yeah, it's nice. Shut up.
Yeah, it's like he really needs someone to be able to bounce things off of, and maybe some sort of chief engineer could be his best friend for that sort of thing.
Yeah, we don't know what he's doing at the minute, Mr. Chief Engineer. He's mentioned in this episode later, but it doesn't exist. So Crusher wanders onto the bridge a little bit confused. Picard's annoyed that she can't explain what happened to Worf and doesn't seem to really care. Mm-hmm. And she starts looking up, she says she's going to start looking up stuff in the medical database, but she really starts looking at helm control and then the blue electricity leaves her and goes into the computer, which makes her immediately be confused and run off back to her office.
I appear to have wandered onto the bridge somehow. That's weird.
Now, I do feel like if you're, a ranking officer on the ship and you suddenly wind up in a place you have no idea how you got to, you might want to mention it to someone.
Yes. This might still be the crew still trying to gel, and maybe Crusher doesn't know how to react in this situation, given, these are all new people she's kind of getting used to being around. But even still, this should be a massive red flag.
So she leaves. The console Data's working at stops. So does the one next to it. Then the warp drive shuts down. And then the transporter shuts down. Everything's turning off, basically.
Yeah, well, that's awkward. I guess we're not going to make it to Parliament in time.
Lieutenant Singh from engineering is brought up to explain these malfunctions, and he can't. There's some sort of roving electrical short happening in the system, but none of the systems are actually connected.
So, wait, there's no EPS conduits. Maybe that's our problem.
So they have no actual information, and Singh is just told to fix the problem in sort of an unfair way, but I guess he's one of the engineers, so, go off.
It's like, all right, I guess I'll do all of this by myself.
Meanwhile, the Antikins are at it again because they were found outside of the Sele corridors with weapons. But, not weapons, tools for killing animals. How silly to think they're weapons.
Yes, we were just going to go collect our food animals, and we just happened to drop by over here. Yeah.
They're doing hilarious hijinks off over there. That's one of the things that makes this episode so forgettable, is like the Sele and Antikin B plot is this weird comedy skit aside that doesn't even mildly connect to anything else that's going on.
It's just sort of an annoyance for the crew.
Yeah,
they kind of treat it like that too.
There's no tie-in to the A story of the episode. There's no thematic similarity. There's nothing. It's just there.
Well, it does give them an excuse to for the everyone in the B plot to sort of complain. It's like, we're not getting there fast enough, guys.
Yeah, but they don't even particularly seem to care.
Yeah.
So the ship continues to break down. Data realizes that it would be impossible for the ship to have lasted this long if it was this broken.
Mm-hmm.
So there must be someone doing it. They have a saboteur on board. So Picard makes an offhand reference that will change the course of Star Trek history, that they need a private investigator. Data goes, what's a private investigator? And they go, oh, like Sherlock Holmes. It's like, ooh.
I might have to investigate this. Maybe get myself a prop.
So in engineering, Wesley is helping Singh work. They have a breakthrough. He's like, hey, look at that. And then Wesley's sent away to do schoolwork because Wesley's never allowed to take credit for anything, which is another thing. They treat him pretty bad, honestly.
Yeah, so people do complain about Wesley being sort of the wonder kid who saves the ship all the time, but also the crew kind of crap on him all the time.
Yeah,
because they don't want to give him any credit.
Don't let him work on the thing if you're gonna just kick him out as soon as anything happens.
Yes.
So he wanders off to complain to his mother, who doesn't remember anything that they said to each other earlier in the day or that she saw him at all, who, just like Worf, can't remember what happened to him before. They both have memory blackouts.
Mom, did you just randomly fall down like Worf did? No, I was still standing up when I got possessed. You got possessed? What?
That happens to people on this ship a lot. They're used to it. So Singh continues to work on the warp drive, and then the blue electricity thing hits him, and he falls down next to the warp core, where Worf finds him, and he's dead.
Oh no! It's gonna be a while before we have someone from Indian heritage in a crew role full, aren't we?
Yep. We killed one. So yeah. Turns out the warp drive is fixed, and even Wesley knows that Singh couldn't have fixed it in the time that he was working on it because he was right there, but everyone's like, who cares? It's fixed. Seems like a weirdly irresponsible way to look at this situation.
Yes. Yeah, as a scientist myself here, sometimes it's nice when things just start working, but you have to be suspicious about why they just start working, because that probably means that there's a problem that will crop up just sort of randomly later down the road, and you need to be prepared for it. So more testing is necessary. But Parliament!
So at this point, it's obvious that it's not only a saboteur on board, but a murderer.
Dun, dun, dun.
And of course, the place to start is with the non-crew. So they interrogate the Antikins. I guess the Antikin makeup must have been easier because they get a lot more screen time.
Yes, well, they're both kind of just big rubber masks to a degree, but maybe they were easier to put on or something.
They claim that the entire time they were eating an animal. A very big, interesting animal.
Yes, like all night. Takes a while.
Yeah. So Data, in Sherlock Holmes mode, complete with pipe, walks them through the timeline that when Singh died, the delegates were heading towards each other. So they were lying. They weren't in their quarters, but they also were nowhere near engineering. They were wandering around and collecting medical supplies because they're much too interested in killing each other to try to kill any of them.
Which, I guess, hooray for the crew?
Yeah.
We got murderers on board, but they're not trying to murder us, so it's fine.
So in sickbay, Troy tries hypnosis on Worf and Dr. Crusher to see if they can remember what happened during their lost memories. Both of them say exactly the same thing, that there was something in their minds controlling them completely.
That's awkward.
This confirms it since, as Data says, it can't be any of the delegates, and it also can't be any of the crew, which means there's something else on board doing all of this. And just then, the bridge starts to break again as if to prove his point.
Well, I guess we didn't really need to actually figure this out because we got obvious evidence now.
Mm-hmm. Picard comes to look at the helm, and blue electricity jumps up his arm. Then everything suddenly works again, and he orders them to turn around and head back to the energy cloud.
That's not suspicious at all.
So, Data, Crusher, Troy, and Riker are concerned because Picard's acting weird and has ordered the ship to turn around, which is basically against their orders from Starfleet, and he's probably been taken over by an alien. But there's no particular reason to remove him from command because he's not really putting the ship in danger, and they can't prove that he's taken over by an alien without really going into a whole mutiny thing.
Wait, whether there's a surefire way to tell if he's been, taken over by some alien entity. If he starts singing and he's not trying to capture Data at the same time, that's a surefire sign.
So they confront Picard. He says that they're the crazy ones and orders that they all undergo physical and psychiatric exams.
I wonder if do they actually do that?
They come back with results later.
I suspect maybe Crusher's like, yeah, this is silly. I'm just going to copy your old results.
On the way back to sickbay, though, Riker is grabbed by one of the Scilly with a neck catcher doodah, that animal control uses.
Yes,
that's fun. It's also fluorescent green. I kind of like it. It's a neat looking prop.
Mm-hmm.
Crusher returns with the exams and asks if Picard's in there, but he's like, yeah, but also something more, and we're going to be home soon. So I guess they did just confirm that he's been taken over by an alien. They could have just asked, apparently.
All right. So yeah, I'm going to go and back out of the room here and let everyone else know what's up, and we're going to not be following your orders anymore because you are obviously compromised.
So they arrive at the cloud. Picard explains that a sentient entity was accidentally picked up by the ship and was, of course, terrified because it accidentally got scooped up into a weird, strange environment.
Called Worf.
And it did accidentally kill Singh, which it very much regrets. But when it found Picard, they got along because they're both explorers and they can explore in a way that Picard never thought possible before. So, cool. He fills the bridge with electricity that apparently is very, very bright and stuns the crew and runs off with the transporter. He's become a flashbang.
Yeah, so Picard's joined entity is now superpowered, and it's like, I'm just going to leave here. Bye!
Yeah. So he goes to the transporter room and beams himself into the cloud as energy not rematerializing.
Well, that's potentially, deadly for Picard.
Yeah, seems like it could be. We have literally no conception of how transporters work at all ever, so
yeah.
maybe not. You know, Riker and the ship stay by the cloud for a few hours, but they have no way to know if Picard even survived this process, let alone where he would be. So they have no choice but to continue on their mission. Except just then, Troy gets some emotional readings from Picard, and he's all alone, because the energy thing can't actually bring them with them the way that they thought. So they move the ship in close, hoping that he can find his way back, and a P appears on the console of the computer.
P for... I was going to say something else. But Picard, yes.
So Data runs to the transporter, hoping that Picard has the same plan, that they can use the pattern from his beam out to return him back into his body just before he left.
So hopefully Picard, as energy being, has all the mass energy required to rebuild his body.
So Picard from before comes back, who has no memory of what's going on, because this is the Picard from before he beamed out to the energy cloud.
And so he's like, I'm a little confused. Did I die? And they're like, kind of, yeah, but, it's fine.
Yeah, happens. So Yar shows up in the middle of all of this. There's blood outside the Sele quarters. The cooks have been asked to boil a reptile. And Picard decides that he really does need some rest overall. And he's going to bed. Riker can deal with this.
They very much it's like, oh yeah, that's not really a concern, Tasha. Sorry, we're still in the moment of Picard's now back, and we don't have to worry about this whole murder situation.
So that's it. Riker has to deal with this. B plot goes completely unresolved because it's just there.
Yeah.
A
it's
plot
the comic relief.
is mostly unresolved. Also,
it's like, well, we got back to where we were before.
Yep.
Hooray!
We returned to exactly the same place we were 15 minutes into the episode.
That's a thing that happened, and now let's carry on. End of episode.
Yep. See, people love to talk about how there's no character growth in Next Generation, because everyone likes to talk up the semi-serialized thing that DS9 did. But there is character growth in Next Generation, and episodes like this prove it, because no one did or learned anything in this episode. Which is one of the reasons that it seems so forgettable.
Yes, in later episodes they have experiences and they remember them. Although I guess Data did technically have character growth.
Yeah, this is true, because Data picked up the Sherlock Holmes thing, which comes up a lot. In fact, it's going to come up later this season.
So what can we say about Sherlock Holmes at this point without getting too much into the, the weeds there?
Oh, I did have something slightly prepared for Sherlock Holmes. So, Sherlock Holmes, character thought up by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. He hated writing him to the point that he tried to kill him off. There was mass public outrage, and he had to do the first massively recorded retcon in fiction history.
Whoops.
Possibly happened before. It's, stuff like that in fiction's a little unclear, but possibly the first serialized retcon.
So he died, he came back because the people demanded it.
Yep. And I did have an interesting thought that they have Data do Sherlock Holmes a lot, and they love some of these Occam's razor quotes and these logical things. They love using Sherlock Holmes as a logic thing. They mention him a lot because of the Vulcan thing, and then the way that Data is essentially a computer, so thinks very logically. Yes. There's a complete misconception of the way that Sherlock Holmes functions as a character, in that they say deduction a lot. They cannot shut up about deduction in Sherlock Holmes stories.
Yes.
But he does not deduce anything in any of these stories. He infers. Deduction is logically looking at a bunch of facts and them leading you to an inevitable conclusion that can only exist because of those presupposed facts. Inference means that you take a logic leap based on the stuff you know.
So we have these, potentially incomplete data, but given what we know, that these is the possibilities that are available to us. And that will lead us in the right direction on solving this crime.
So I was talking about this right before I started this episode. So I actually have a quote up, which is this is one of my favorite kind of takedowns of Sherlock Holmes, even though it's sort of a side dig. It's a quote from Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett, which is part of the Discworld series. And to set it up, this is his detective character, Sam Vimes, sort of his thought process on clues and making deductions from them.
Okay.
Nice. He had a jaundiced view of clues. He instinctively distrusted them. They got in the way, and he distrusted the kind of person who'd take one look at another man and say in a lordly voice to his companion, "Ah, my dear sir, I can tell you nothing except that he is a left-handed stonemason who has spent some years in the merchant navy and has recently fallen on hard times." Then unroll a lot of supercilious commentary about calluses and stance and the state of the man's boots, when exactly the same comments could apply to a man who was wearing his old clothes because he'd been doing a spot of home bricklaying for a new barbecue pit, and been tattooed once when he was drunk and 17, the two terms are often synonymous, and in fact got seasick on wet pavement. What arrogance, what an insult to the rich and chaotic variety of human experience.
Because that characterization is sort of one of the tropes that pops up in sort of when people are talking about Holmes especially. And that is one of those tropes that shows up in a lot of Star Trek Sherlock Holmes stories, where, you know, Data's like, in the role of Holmes, like, I am going to look at you and say this, that, and the other thing about you. And then the holodeck, you know, is like, no, he's actually right-handed today. Whoops.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I do enjoy that later on. Like, they go weirdly off the rails with it, but in season 2, they have that thing of Data just memorizes all the Sherlock Holmes stories.
So it's time to do something new.
So yeah, that's Holmes.
Anything about the author we should bring up?
About Conan Doyle? Or...
Yes, he's a writer, physician, probably explains why Holmes apparently knows a lot about, like, chemistry and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Was really, really big into phrenology, which we've talked about before, which is actually why Holmes is described as looking so weird, with a particularly, like, long, narrow head, because he took the stuff that should describe the personality that he wanted from phrenology and then, like, put it onto the character description.
What does the shape of the head just tell me about my character? Oh, no, what's the reverse that? What does my character tell me about the shape of his head?
Yes, because you could do that with phrenology.
Yes. Yeah, so it's bunk science. We've already talked about that.
Complete bunk science. Though, reminds me of another thing, since I was just bringing up a Discworld quote, there's an aside in one of his other books that they embrace phrenology in the Discworld city, and then a service pops up to bash you on the head with a hammer and change the shape of your skull to give you whatever personality you wanted.
That sounds horribly dangerous.
So anyway, I should just start a Discworld podcast at some point.
Now we can do more stuff about Conan Doyle and his, I guess, complicated life, because he is a sir, so he got knighted. Something about Boer Wars or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. He was in the military. Like, he's got basically Watson's backstory. Doctor, really big into spiritualism, which was very, very popular at the time, and also wrote the dinosaur book.
Dinosaur?
Lost World, which is the spawn of so much dinosaur fiction and so much colonialist bull.
Yeah. So he was very much a fellow who was of his time, you could say. Very British Empire is gonna do the thing.
Yeah, he was of his time, which is the polite way we have of saying that people used to be way racist.
Yeah, so probably not a good person.
Yeah. But, he created one of the most enduring literary characters in human history.
Yes, Holmes is sometimes credited as being one of the most portrayed characters in all of fiction.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Not entirely sure if that's true, but it's probably up there at the very least.
One of those things that's difficult to track.
Peter Cushing ever play Holmes? I think he might have.
There is an interesting thing that occurred to me with this last bit of the episode with Picard being sent out, because I'm sure anyone who is involved in the Star Trek fan stuff has seen this fun hot take that keeps going around the Star Trek communities at various times, that the transporters are actually killing people.
Yes.
What the transporter does is basically just kill you on one end and clone you on the other.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, I believe, I think it's a Canadian cartoon, like a one-off short, where basically there's someone shows up, it's like, I have a teleporter, and it will move you from one place to another. And then someone's like, okay, so how does this actually work? Well, it creates a new you and destroys the previous one. But what if you delay the destruction of the previous one? Can I hang out with myself? Sure, but we gotta destroy one of you at some point. Okay, let's do that then. Let's see how this works out. and the argument ends up being like, wait, so this is the new me. So does that mean things like all my bills they are owed by someone who's now dead? Cool.
What was that clone show on Netflix? Was recommended on one of our movie episodes.
Well, there was Clone High.
No. Living with Yourself. Living with Yourself is basically that concept. I did watch it. It was recommended on one of our movie episodes by our guest, and I watched it, and it is quite good and worth checking out if you have Netflix.
I'll have to keep an eye out for it.
But what occurred to me with this episode, and it's pretty synonymous with how they show transporters actually working in the show, which is interesting how, it's very convenient for people trying to do these gotcha hot take Star Trek theory videos that they want to stick entirely to the text of the show when they're trying to talk about how many people Kirk has slept with. But when they want to talk about the transporters being murder machines, they can completely ignore it. I'm not bitter at anyone.
Well, I think that, later in TNG, we do sort of have a first-person perspective of it. That it's sort of like you're being, I guess, pieced, you're taken apart and, put back together in a very sort of continuous fashion. So it's almost like you're kind of in both places at once for a little bit, but still, that also means you're being taken apart and put back together.
Well, we have several times where they showed that you remain conscious through the entire process, yes. Which that kind of continuity kind of negates the you get killed and reconstructed idea. But also this, where they're saying that they are sending out his energy and then not recombining it on the other end, which essentially, like, you can get into theological arguments with this on some level, but essentially what this is saying and how the transporters are shown to function in Star Trek is that they are dealing with the human soul.
Yep.
Whatever quintessential essence of humanity that they believe will remain when you remove all material from the human is what the transporter is sending from one place to the other.
So if you ever wanted to steal someone's soul, you just steal their transporter pattern.
Yeah, so essentially the transporters are taking whatever this is, like, we don't have a better word for it, so it is the soul, but that can be divorced from a religious context. It's just, the quintessential thing that is human inside of you, and they're taking that and moving it from place to place, and all of the rest doesn't particularly matter.
Now, the core you, it endures. It is tangible. It is something that could be put through a computer system and energized.
Yeah, this too. This thing, which they've also done in Stargate and a lot of other stuff, that, whatever you are can be put into a computer. Just exist as energy.
And I guess also to a certain extent, there's a strong, I guess, transporter soul version of you and mind version of you are very, I guess, linked tightly in that sort of case. There's a reason in the game show bit I keep bringing up hard drive brain. Because, literally you're just, it's like, okay, this is the same physical body, but your brain is being completely, taken over or replaced or swapped out sort of magically. And, sometimes it involves transporter, sometimes not. But it is very much the full you is now being placed in this place, and that, independent of what happened to your body, is still the you.
Yes. We've had this discussion on other things a little bit, but yeah, it's this idea that you can take you out of you, the person, and put it into something else, and it will not only still be the same, but maintain some sort of continuity with itself. This is the Picard of Theseus. Yeah.
Well, I guess this means that the only true moments when we are, fully, not cognizant of the world in Star Trek is when we're asleep or dead.
Possibly, yeah. It's an interesting one to look at, because I feel like this is one of those kind of like things that you get to when everyone has a middle school understanding of science. Because this is obviously one of these. Someone heard the phrase, everything that happens in your body is just electricity.
Yeah.
And then...
That's as far as they went.
Yeah. Which, broadly true, but only insofar as any set of electrons interacting is electricity. Because a lot of what happens in your brain and body is chemicals and some amount of bioelectric stuff. But a lot of it is chemicals.
Yeah, it's a complicated system that has multiple parts of various different sort of, for lack of a better term, material components. There's the physical structure of your neurons. There's the chemicals that they're sharing. There's the electrical impulses. There's even things like pressure and oxygen levels and sort of little extra details like that. Temperature also affects things, and if your brain is not well taken care of on all these sort of fronts, it starts acting up and all that sort of thing. And the you that is can I guess experience all of this, but you're going to be having a bad time because you suddenly don't quite feel like yourself.
I can definitely accept the sort of conceit of a lot of science fiction that there could exist some sort of intelligent thing that we would consider a life form that is made entirely of energy, because it's energy that is coalesced into a particular way or pattern that is able to take on the characteristics that we think of as alive, which we have a very dubious grasp on. To be clear, we have no idea, we have no particularly good working definition of alive, but we could wind up with an energy thing that is close enough that we would consider it to be such.
Heck, a friend of mine has an original character that is basically a dirty plasma that is effectively a standing, self-contained plasma entity that uses modes within the plasma to simulate thought, memory, and all that sort of stuff. So
I think the general thing that we get mixed up, and of course it's sci-fi, it's all space magic, but people are not that. People are a complex interaction of various chemical processes that are all material. We are fundamentally made of atoms and molecules, which are not energy. I mean, everything is both in the E=mc squared kind of way, but we don't know how to detangle one from the other.
Yes, we still have to keep track of our lepton number here, so got to be careful about that.
It's like, even if you could just take all of the matter in your body and turn it into energy, you would not wind up with the same thing even remotely, because it would all be energy now.
I would like to turn myself into energy. Well, you're just going to kind of explode, right?
Yeah.
Wait, is that how it works?
Unless you do it slowly, which I guess then you are on fire. You could slowly oxidize. I suppose that would do it.
Yes.
Which is largely what we're all doing anyway.
Dying slowly. We are the only ones right now that are dying.
So overall, I just find it an odd conceit, and I can see where you can use it to talk about, what does make a human quintessentially a human. Is it different than other animals? Is it something inside of your body? Is it the body itself? Is there at a fundamental level any kind of actual separation between mind and body and consciousness? We don't know the answers to these questions. They're particularly impossible, and this is a place where you can talk about those things. This episode doesn't. What gets me is when people take it as an actual serious thing, because for some reason anything that's presented in science fiction is taken as a version of reality that could actually exist given the proper technology, instead of a way to write about the human condition. So you have a lot of people who basically believe that yes, you could upload your brain into a computer.
The whole I want to be a robot so I can live forever situation,
which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, I'm not saying there couldn't be some sort of technology that could eventually do something that could mimic thought processes or brains or whatever, but it would probably also work fundamentally differently from how your brain does.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way forward there is a supplemental sort of structure where, it's like, okay, my brain is getting kind of up in years and, some of the processes are breaking down. Maybe I'll get like an implant chip that will start acting as my backup memory or something like that. And you can sort of, ship a Theseus yourself into a robot existence. But, that's going to be a much more complicated process than I'm going to put electrodes on my head and go.
You have to see where you wind up with, too. I mean, you do wind up with an interesting thing in the Ship of Theseus brain situation. As you slowly replace every part of your brain with a computer, at what point is it no longer human? Does that carry over? How does that function? We can't actually do anything remotely close to that now, so we don't wind up in this situation.
Well, it's maybe something interesting to think about, and there is kind of an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine that kind of tackles this to a degree.
Yeah, a little bit. But like, we don't actually know. We don't know enough about how something is fundamental to what we can consider to be our contiguous existence as memory functions. We have no idea how memory functions in your brain, where it's stored, how it's stored, the processes that allow it to be stored or recalled. And so it is fundamentally impossible to do anything with it, and memory is the one thing that we usually would consider to be the most contiguous to our mental existence.
Those strings of chemicals that are, the encrypted data that is what we have experienced, our lives past that inform our present.
And how in the world would you even store that? It's not just information. Like, everything that we do know about memory recall is that it's basically you making it up again every time you remember it.
Yep. It's like I'm kind of reading this, but at the same time, if the interpretation part of my brain has changed, the memory is going to come out a little different.
Yeah, it'd be like if every time you opened a picture on your computer, instead of reading out every single, pixel point and decompressing it in however it's been compressed and giving you exactly the same picture every time, the computer had a vague idea of what the picture was supposed to look like and recreated it from scratch every single time you opened it.
Yeah, it's like those deep learning websites where it's like, I want a picture of this, and it gives you so you put in Bart Simpson and suddenly there's some spiky hair here. There's now 3 eyes and 4 legs, and that's Bart Simpson, apparently.
I know, that's probably a lot closer to how a computer would remember things in the same way that we do. As if you told the computer to just remake it from a neural net every single time.
Yes. I should show you the Bart Museum sometime.
I've played with a lot of those neural picture thingies. They're very fun and off-putting.
Yes.
All right, did you have much else? We're about an hour.
No, not really. I guess we could, I could ponder a bit about, okay, so what if someone's just died, but you have their transporter pattern? Can you bring them back to life? But, that Star Trek really never does that, so,
They don't, but they seem to infer that if you, started with a dead body, it wouldn't work. You need the base whatever it is. So even if you had a recent pattern, you couldn't beam up the dead body and get back an alive one.
Yeah. Or let's say someone suffers a horrible injury and they lose a leg. If you beam up them and their severed leg at the same time, could you reattach it?
That one's a bit iffy because they do have cases where they can cure diseases and other things.
Yes. So there's a lot of sort of mystery and magic with the transporter that is not well explained, but I guess we have certain rules that are just sort of implied, and we're not supposed to think about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, as with all Star Trek, space magic.
Yep. Space magic. Roll up for the mystery tour?
Yeah. Should we sing again? The only thing I remember about making the song for that episode is the only comments that we got were, I don't know what this song is. And I somehow thought the Beatles were a little more universal than that.
Well, it is, one of the Beatles' lesser known tunes, but,
A little bit, yeah. I guess I had that album when I was a kid, so it was very well known to me.
Well, maybe we can slowly introduce people to the full discography of the Beatles.
Beatles cast.
So today's episode is sponsored by the Yellow Submarine.
All right, we're completely off the rails. This was a freaking nothing episode to begin with. So, time to move on to the galaxy's favorite game show! Woo!
Hey everybody, welcome to the game show portion of the show. You're all looking quite beautiful today. Even you, Mr. Energy Being. Oh. We got our various contestants here have lined up and got themselves some points. They've been answering questions, going on some physical obstacles, and apparently trying to murder each other too. Maybe you have to do something about that. But it's time to start handing out the prizes for today's episode, so let's get started. The first one is the Hard Drive Brain Prize, which goes to everybody that got possessed by the energy being, because apparently just overlaying completely different personalities over a human brain is just that easy. What do they win, Kepwin?
They know this is happening. This happens all the time in Star Trek. They need one of those Inception machines so that they can go in and install a personal firewall thing like they do in there.
Have a bunch of guys with guns just sort of randomly showing up whenever another alien kind of enters the brain. The alien's like, oh crap, I didn't think this is that kind of brain. I gotta go. Oh. Our second prize is the Silly Primitives Prize, which goes to Antikins and Sele for being the awkward comic relief, trying to murder each other, and generally looking down on the crew in the most head-scratching of ways. Yeah. Anyway, what do they win, Gepwin?
Oh yeah, they win a sitcom-style episode on Lower Decks, because it's amazing to me that these two have not shown up on Lower Decks yet.
I think at least one of them may have shown up as a background character, but I'm not remembering it fully at the moment. It could have been a different alien. Anyway, our third prize is the To Die is Logical prize, which goes to Picard, maybe? Though the entity may have just been lying about Picard being totally on board with the whole suicide adventure. What does Picard win this time, Gepwin?
I mean, Picard seems to get this, but he wins more therapy, because it seems like a pretty traumatic experience. Though maybe he doesn't need it now since they just wiped his memories of the whole thing and he can forget about it.
Well, hopefully he doesn't wake up in the middle of the night with memories of being pulled apart and deposited in a gas energy cloud thingamajig, because that might be, kind of a thing that would haunt you over time.
They should also really put one of these things in the transporter, because this is way too easy to do, and they can beam people into space. Like, the transporter should probably have some sort of safety check to make sure where you're going is okay.
Yes, because I do recall that time Kirk kind of accidentally beamed some people into space that one time. Yeah. Anyway, our final prize is the Elementary Watson Prize, which goes to Data for being introduced to Sherlock Holmes for the first time. The first of many times we'll be running into that.
Data wins a retcon where he looked like he was dead, and then suddenly they retcon it to where he's not dead, but I guess they sort of already did that, so never mind.
Data, the dead but not dead android of the future. Yeah, that's all I got, Gepwin. Our various other contestants were unable to score any points, so I guess we got to get out of here. Maybe they'll have a better look at Parliament.
Yeah, we'll head off to Parliament and do whatever it is you do there. Apparently settle long-running racial disputes. Oh, thank you all for coming. We avoided talking about racism for an entire episode, mostly,
Barely.
except for with Conan Doyle. So I guess we just lost the let's try not to talk about racism for once prize. Anyway, thank you for joining us. So the galaxy's favorite game show!
Woo! So isn't Parliament like a funkadelic band or something?
Might be.
Yeah, Parliament Funkadelic. It's an American funk music collective of rotating musical heads by George Clinton. Oh, I see now.
All right, fun. This is one of the most forgettable episodes of the first season and probably Star Trek generally. But the next episode is one of the ones that everyone remembers for A variety of reasons. Some say that it actually is one of the better ones of the first season that brings up some good themes and stuff. Some people say it has a really stupid concept and remember it for being just kind of dumb. And some people remember it because it's one of those episodes that centers Wesley as the entire crux of the episode.
And this time he's not really saving the ship. He's in a very different role, sort of.
Yeah, he doesn't save anything. In fact, he puts himself in unnecessary danger.
Yes, because planet of pre-warp civilization has weird laws, apparently.
Yeah, very weird. This entire episode doesn't make any sense on any level, but, you know, we'll get into it. Next episode, we're doing Justice. I don't know, it's the episode where they try to kill Wesley.
Yep. So we'll see if he manages to survive.
Yeah, look forward
Yeah.
to us having a very detailed, depressing talk about judicial systems.
Yes. Wish us luck.
Yeah, next time on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, there is no justice. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.